Save me, 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. Clara Weston's voice cracked as water rose past her chest in the flooded cellar. She clawed at the walls until her fingernails tore off. Victor Harlan had locked her in here 3 days ago. His last words still echoed in her skull. Say yes to marrying me or drown like the rat you are. The water touched her chin. Clara screamed one final time, and somewhere above, a stranger's boots hit the cellar door. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe now because what happens next will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Thomas Brennan hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 years. He'd planned to keep it that way, but when he heard a woman screaming from the old mill cellar, his body moved before his mind could stop it. He kicked the door once, twice. The rusted hinges exploded. Black water poured out, and with it came Clara Weston choking, gasping, her fingers bloody and raw. Thomas caught her before she hit the ground. "Please." Clara grabbed his shirt with both hands. "Please don't let him take me back." "Who did this to you, Victor Harlan?" Clara's teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "He wants to marry me. I said no. So he put me in there to change my mind." Thomas's jaw tightened. Harlan, the railroad man who'd been buying up Montana territory with money and murder. Everyone knew his name. Everyone feared it. "Can you walk?" Thomas asked. Clara tried to stand. Her legs buckled immediately. Thomas lifted her without another word. She weighed almost nothing. How long since she'd eaten? "Where are you taking me?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Away from here." He set her on his horse and swung up behind her. Clara's frozen body pressed against his chest as he kicked the animal into a gallop. They rode for 10 minutes in silence. Then Clara spoke again. "He'll come for me. You know that. Let him. You don't understand." Clara twisted to look at him. "Harlan has 20 men. Maybe more. He'll burn down anyone who stands in his way. I've dealt with worse." Clara studied his face. Something in his eyes made her believe him. "What's your name?" she asked. "Thomas." "Thomas Brennan." Clara nodded slowly. "Thomas Brennan. I'm going to make you a deal." Thomas kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "I don't make deals. You'll want this one." Clara's voice hardened despite her shivering. "Save me from Harlan. Hide me. Protect me. And I'll give you everything I have. 3 times a day. Morning, noon, and night." Thomas's hands tightened on the reins. "What exactly are you offering?" "Whatever you need." Clara didn't flinch. "Cooking, cleaning, companionship. My body, if you want it. I have nothing else to bargain with." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're delirious. Hypothermia makes people say things they don't mean. I mean every word." Clara grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "My brother sold me to Harlan to pay his gambling debts. Sold me like livestock. Harlan thinks he owns me now. But if I give myself to you on my terms, then I choose. For the first time in my life, I choose who I belong to." Thomas looked into her eyes. No shame there. No desperation. Just cold, burning defiance. "I'm 52 years old," he said. "I've been alone for 7 years. I'm not the kind of man who takes advantage of dying women. I'm not dying anymore." Clara held his gaze. "You saved me. Now let me save you back. Save me from what? From whatever's been killing you slowly out here by yourself." Thomas didn't answer. He just turned back to the trail and rode faster. They reached his ranch as darkness fell. Thomas carried Clara inside and set her down by the cold fireplace. "I need to start a fire," he said. "You need to get those wet clothes off before you freeze to death." Clara nodded. "Then give me something to wear." Thomas hesitated. Then he walked to the bedroom and opened a chest he hadn't touched in 7 years. Margaret's clothes, still folded exactly as she'd left them. He brought a wool dress back to Clara. "Here." Clara took it and looked at him. This belonged to someone. "My wife." She's been dead 7 years. Clara's expression shifted. I'm sorry. Don't be. Thomas turned away. Just get changed. I'll make broth. He busied himself in the kitchen, refusing to look back as Clara stripped off her wet clothes. His hands shook as he worked. Not from cold, from something else. Something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. When he brought the broth to Clara, she was sitting by the fire in Margaret's dress. Too big for her. But color was returning to her cheeks. Thank you. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. You didn't have to save me. I couldn't leave you to drown. Most men would have. Clara took a sip. Most men would have delivered me straight to Harlan for a reward. Thomas sat down across from her. I'm not most men. No. Clara studied him over the rim of her cup. You're not. That's why I trust you. You shouldn't trust anyone. Too late. Clara almost smiled. I already trust you more than I've trusted anyone in 3 years. They sat in silence. Clara finished her broth. Then she looked at Thomas with those fierce green eyes. I meant what I said on the horse. 3 times a day. That's my promise. Thomas shook his head. You don't owe me anything. This isn't about debt. Clara set down her cup. This is about choice. My whole life men have chosen for me. My father chose to die and leave me with nothing. My brother chose to sell me. Harlan chose to own me. But you gave me something no man ever has. What a chance to choose for myself. Clara leaned forward. So I'm choosing you, Thomas Brennan. Not because I have to, because I want to. Thomas's throat tightened. You don't even know me. Then I'll learn. Clara stood and walked toward him. Starting tomorrow, 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. I'll cook your meals. I'll work beside you. I'll sit with you when the darkness gets too heavy. And maybe if you let me, I'll remind you what it feels like to be alive. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she'd used. Deal. Clara extended her hand. Thomas looked at her hand, then at her face, then back at her hand. He took it. Deal. Clara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Then she walked to the bedroom door and paused. Good night, Thomas Brennan. Good night, Clara Weston. She disappeared into the bedroom. Thomas sat alone by the fire, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The next morning, Thomas woke to the smell of bacon. He was on his feet before his mind caught up. Bacon. He hadn't smelled bacon cooking in 7 years. Clara stood at the stove wearing Margaret's dress, her dark hair tied back. Good morning. She didn't turn around. I found eggs in the henhouse. Hope you don't mind. Thomas stared at her. How long have you been awake? A few hours? I couldn't sleep. Clara finally turned to face him. This is the first time. Morning, like I promised. She set a plate in front of him. Bacon, eggs, fresh bread. Thomas's stomach growled despite himself. Eat. Clara sat across from him with her own plate. You look like you haven't had a real meal in years. I haven't. Then we're fixing that today. They ate in silence. When Thomas finished, Clara took his plate and washed it without being asked. What needs doing around the ranch? She asked. Thomas blinked. What horses? Cattle? Fences? What needs doing? You don't have to work. I'm not sitting around waiting for Harlan to find me. Clara crossed her arms. Tell me what needs doing. Thomas almost smiled. East fence needs mending. Then teach me. They worked side by side all morning. Clara's hands blistered on the fence wire. She didn't complain. One of the horses nipped her shoulder. She didn't flinch. At noon, she made him stop for lunch. This is the second time. Clara handed him bread and cheese. Noon, like I promised. Thomas took the food. Why are you doing this? Because yesterday was the first day in 3 years I felt like a person instead of property. Clara sat beside him on the fence rail. And because you look at me like I matter. You do matter. Clara's eyes softened. That's the first time anyone said that to me since my father died. They ate in silence. But something had shifted between them. A wall coming down. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Thomas nodded. Your wife. What was she like? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Kind. The kindest person I ever knew. How did she die? Childbirth. Thomas's voice cracked. The baby, too. A boy. Clara reached out and touched his arm. I'm sorry. It was 7 years ago. Grief doesn't have an expiration date. Clara squeezed his arm. You don't get over losing someone you love. You just learn to carry the weight. Thomas looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Who did you lose? My father. 3 years ago. He wasn't perfect, but he loved me. After he died, my brother took over everything, gambled it all away. And when the debts came due, he sold the only thing he had left. You. Me. Clara's jaw tightened. He didn't even tell me himself. I just woke up with Harlan's men at my door. Your brother is still alive. Somewhere. Drinking himself to death, probably. Thomas's hands clenched. If I ever meet him, I'll kill him. Clara looked at him with surprise. You mean that? I do. She leaned closer. That's the second time you've made me feel like I matter, Thomas Brennan. That evening, Clara sat beside Thomas by the fire, close enough that their shoulders touched. This is the third time, she said softly. Evening, like I promised. Thomas turned to look at her. You kept your word. I always keep my word. Clara met his eyes. Do you believe me now? Thomas nodded slowly. I believe you. Good. Clara took his hand. Because this is just the beginning. They sat like that until the fire burned low. Thomas felt something stirring in his chest. Something he'd thought was dead forever. Then Clara spoke again. Thomas, there's something I need to tell you. What Clara's face went pale. I think someone's watching the house. Thomas was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Where East Ridge? I saw something glinting, like a spyglass. Thomas moved to the window and peered through the shutters. Nothing visible now. But Clara's instincts were sharp. How long, he asked. Maybe an hour. I didn't want to worry you until I was sure. Thomas's jaw tightened. Harlan's men. Scouting. What do we do? Nothing tonight. They're just watching. Thomas turned back to Clara. But tomorrow we prepare for war. Clara nodded. She didn't look scared. She looked determined. Teach me to shoot, she said. What if they come for me? I'm not going to hide behind you and pray. Clara's eyes blazed. Teach me to shoot. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. First thing tomorrow. Clara stood and walked toward the bedroom. At the door she paused. Thomas. Yes, thank you for not treating me like I'm helpless. You're the least helpless person I've ever met. Clara almost smiled. Good night, Thomas. Good night, Clara. She closed the door. Thomas sat back down by the fire rifle across his knees. Sleep wouldn't come tonight. Not with Harlan's men watching. Not with war on the horizon. But for the first time in 7 years, Thomas Brennan had something to fight for. The next 3 days passed in tense preparation. Clara learned to shoot. Her aim was terrible at first. By the third day, she could hit a target at 50 yards. She kept her promise without fail. Morning, she cooked breakfast and cleaned. Noon, she worked beside Thomas on the ranch. Evening, she sat with him by the fire talking, or just existing in comfortable silence. Thomas found himself looking forward to her presence. The house felt different with her in it. Warmer. More alive. On the fourth night, Clara asked him a question that stopped him cold. Thomas, why did you save me? Thomas set down his coffee cup. What do you mean? I mean you haven't spoken to anyone in 3 years. You live out here like a ghost. Why did you risk everything for a stranger? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Because I heard you scream. That's it. That's it. Thomas met her eyes. I heard you scream, and I couldn't pretend I didn't. I've spent 7 years pretending I don't feel anything, pretending I don't care. But when I heard you scream, something broke inside me." Clara leaned forward. "What broke the wall?" Thomas's voice cracked. "The wall I built after Margaret died. I spent 7 years hiding behind it. And then you screamed, and suddenly the wall didn't matter anymore." Clara reached out and touched his face. Her palm was warm against his cheek. "Maybe that wall needed to break," she whispered. Thomas closed his eyes. Maybe it did. Clara leaned closer. Her lips brushed his cheek, then his jaw, then the corner of his mouth. Thomas pulled back. "Clara, don't." "Why not?" "Because you feel obligated." Thomas's voice was rough. "Because I saved your life, and now you think you owe me this." Clara's eyes flashed with anger. "That's not why." "Then why?" "Because you're the first man in 3 years who's looked at me like I'm a person instead of a prize." Clara grabbed his shirt. "Because you make me feel safe. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I was before Harlan tried to break me." Thomas stared at her. His heart was pounding. "I'm 26 years older than you," he said. "I don't care. People will talk. Let them. You could have anyone. Someone young. Someone without ghosts." Clara pulled him closer. "I don't want anyone else. I want you." She kissed him. Thomas froze for one heartbeat. Two. Then something inside him snapped, and he kissed her back. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry. 7 years of loneliness pouring out of him, meeting 3 years of hers. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "That wasn't part of our deal," Clara whispered. "No." Thomas's voice was hoarse. "It wasn't." Clara smiled. "Good. I don't want a deal anymore. I want something real." Thomas looked into her eyes. He saw something there he hadn't seen in 7 years. Hope. Then a gunshot shattered the window behind them. "Down." Thomas threw Clara to the floor and grabbed his rifle. "Stay down." More shots, glass exploding, wood splintering. "Thomas Brennan," a voice boomed from outside. "Send out the girl, now." Clara's face went white. "Harlan." Thomas moved to the broken window and peered out. 6 riders, all armed. Harlan himself sat on a black stallion at the front. "She's not here," Thomas called back. "Don't lie to me, old man." Harlan's voice dripped with contempt. "I've had men watching you for days. I know exactly what you've been doing with my property. She's not your property. Her brother sold her to me. That makes her mine." Harlan drew his pistol. "Now send her out or I'll burn this house down with both of you inside." Clara grabbed Thomas's arm. "Let me go. He'll kill you. I'm not giving you to him." "Thomas, please." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I can't let you die for me." Thomas looked at her. Then he did something that surprised them both. He smiled. "Stay here," he said. "And when I tell you to run, you run. Understand, Thomas? No." "Promise me." Clara hesitated. Then she nodded. "I promise." Thomas kissed her forehead. Then he stood up and walked out the front door. "Harlan." Thomas's voice was calm. "Let's talk about this like civilized men." Harlan laughed. "Civilized? You stole my property and bedded her like a common whore. There's nothing civilized about what I'm going to do to you." Thomas raised his rifle. "Then let's skip the talking." He fired. The shot caught Harlan's horse in the chest. The animal screamed and reared, throwing Harlan to the ground. Thomas was already moving. He fired again. One rider fell. Then another. The remaining 3 opened fire. Bullets tore through the air around Thomas. He dove behind the water trough, reloading as he moved. "Get him!" Harlan scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with rage. "Kill him!" 2 riders charged toward the trough. Thomas dropped the first one with a shot to the chest. The second got close enough to aim his pistol directly at Thomas's head. A gunshot rang out. The rider fell from his horse, a bullet hole in his back. Thomas spun around. Clara stood on the porch, the Colt revolver he'd given her smoking in her hands. "I told you to run," Thomas said. "I lied." Clara aimed at the last rider. "Drop your weapon." The rider looked at Harlan. Harlan was on his feet now, clutching his shoulder where he'd hit the ground. "This isn't over," Harlan snarled. "You hear me, Brennan? This isn't over." He grabbed the last rider's horse and swung into the saddle. Then he rode into the darkness, leaving his dead men behind. Thomas walked over to Clara. His legs were shaking. "You could have been killed," he said. "So could you." Clara lowered the revolver. "But we weren't." Thomas looked at the dead men scattered across his property, then at Clara, then at the burning remains of his peaceful isolation. He started to laugh. "What's funny?" Clara asked. "Nothing." Thomas shook his head. "I just realized something. What I spent 7 years trying to die slowly. And then you showed up and made me want to live again." Clara took his hand. "Is that a bad thing?" Thomas looked at her, covered in gun smoke, eyes blazing with defiance, more alive than anyone he'd ever known. "No," he said quietly. "It's the best thing that's happened to me in 7 years." Clara squeezed his hand. "Then let's make sure we survive long enough to enjoy it." Thomas nodded. "Tomorrow we send a telegram to the federal marshal. Harlan made a mistake tonight. He attacked a former cavalry officer on his own property. That's attempted murder. Will the marshal listen? He will when I tell him about Harlan's land grabs, the forged deeds, the settlers who disappeared." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I've been keeping track, quietly, for 3 years." Clara stared at him. "Why didn't you do anything before?" "Because I didn't have anything left to fight for." Thomas met her eyes. "Now I do." Clara stepped closer, her body pressed against his. "3 times a day," she whispered. "Morning, noon, and night. That's my promise." "And my promise," Thomas said, "is that Victor Harlan will never touch you again, even if I have to kill him myself." Clara kissed him. Soft this time. Gentle. "Then let's go inside," she said. "We have a war to plan." They walked back into the bullet-riddled house, hand in hand. Outside, the dead men lay where they'd fallen. And somewhere in the darkness, Victor Harlan was already planning his revenge. Thomas rode into town before dawn. Clara had wanted to come with him, but he refused. Too dangerous. If Harlan had men watching, they needed to see Thomas alone. The telegraph office opened at 7. Thomas was waiting at the door. "I need to send a message to the federal marshal and Helena Thomas," told the clerk. The clerk's hands trembled as he took the paper. "You sure about this, Mr. Brennan? Victor Harlan won't like it. Victor Harlan can go to hell." Thomas watched the clerk tap out the message. Every click of the telegraph key felt like a hammer driving a nail into Harlan's coffin. When it was done, Thomas paid and walked outside. He made it 3 steps before a voice stopped him cold. Thomas Brennan, the great ghost of Blackstone Valley. Finally decided to rejoin the living. Thomas turned slowly. A man stood in the middle of the street. Young, maybe 25. Wearing a deputy's badge and a smirk that made Thomas's trigger finger itch. "Do I know you?" Thomas asked. "Name's Garrett. Deputy Garrett." The young man rested his hand on his pistol. "Mr. Harlan asked me to deliver a message. I'm not interested." "You will be." Garrett's smirk widened. "Mr. Harlan says to tell you he's bought your mortgage from the bank. Every cent you owe. He's calling it due in 30 days. Pay in full or lose everything." Thomas's blood went cold. "That's not legal. It is when you own the bank." Garrett laughed. "And the sheriff, and the judge. Face it, old man. You're done. Hand over the girl, and maybe Mr. Harlan will forget this whole mess." Thomas stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Tell Harlan something for me." "What's that?" "Tell him I've sent a telegram to the federal marshal. Tell him I've got records of every forged deed, every bribed official, every settler who disappeared on his land. And tell him if he comes near Clara Weston again, I'll put a bullet between his eyes myself." Garrett's smirk faded. "You're making a mistake." "No." Thomas turned and walked toward his horse. "Harlan made the mistake 3 nights ago when he attacked my ranch. Now he's going to pay for it." He mounted up and rode out of town without looking back. Clara was waiting on the porch when he returned. Her face was pale. "What happened?" she asked. Thomas dismounted and walked toward her. His jaw was tight. "Harlan bought my mortgage. He's calling it due in 30 days. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "How much?" $800. "Do you have it?" Thomas shook his head. "Maybe 200 saved. Not enough." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "This is my fault. If I hadn't come here, if I hadn't dragged you into this." Thomas grabbed her shoulders. "Don't. This isn't your fault. Harlan was always going to come for me eventually. I've known too much about him for too long." "Then what do? We fight." Thomas pulled her close. "I sent the telegram. The federal marshal will come. And when he does, Harlan's empire falls. What if he doesn't come in time? Then we hold out until he does." Clara pulled back and looked into his eyes. "You could lose everything. Your ranch, your home, everything you've built." Thomas touched her face. "I already lost everything that mattered 7 years ago, until you showed up and reminded me what living feels like." Clara kissed him, hard and desperate. 3 times a day she whispered against his lips, "That's my promise. And I promise you something else, Thomas Brennan. What we're going to win this. Together." The next 5 days were the most intense of Thomas's life. Clara threw herself into the ranch work with a fury he'd never seen. She was up before dawn, cooking breakfast, cleaning the house, mending clothes he'd let fall apart for years. By noon, she was beside him in the fields, learning to rope cattle, repair fences, manage the accounts. And every evening she sat with him by the fire, going through his records of Harlan's crimes. "There's enough here to hang him twice," Clara said on the 3rd night. "Forged land deeds, bribed officials, witness statements from settlers who were threatened." Thomas nodded. "I've been collecting it for 3 years. Never had a reason to use it." "Why not?" "Because I didn't care if I lived or died." Thomas met her eyes. "Hard to fight for justice when you've got nothing to live for." Clara reached out and took his hand. "And now I have everything to live for." Clara smiled. "That's the first time you've said anything like that. It's the first time I've meant anything like that in 7 years." She leaned against his shoulder. "Tell me about Margaret." Thomas stiffened. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me." Clara's voice was soft. "I'm wearing her clothes, sleeping in her bed. I think I should know who she was." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to talk. "Margaret was a schoolteacher when I met her. Just finished cavalry duty. 20 years of war and death, and then I walked into her classroom to return a book her father had lent me. She was reading poetry to a room full of children, and she looked up at me with these eyes that saw right through every wall I'd built." Clara listened without interrupting. "We were married 6 months later." Thomas's voice cracked. 10 years. 10 good years. And then she got pregnant. We were so happy. Built a nursery. Picked out names. Samuel if it was a boy. Elizabeth if it was a girl. What happened? Complications. Thomas's hands clenched. The baby came early. Too early. Margaret bled for hours. The doctor couldn't stop it. By morning they were both gone. Clara's arms wrapped around him. "I'm so sorry. I blamed myself." Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. "I should have taken her to a bigger town, found a better doctor, done something. It wasn't your fault. I know that now." Thomas turned to look at her. "But for 7 years I convinced myself it was. That's why I stopped living. Because I thought I deserved to suffer." Clara touched his face. "And now I think Margaret would want me to be happy." Thomas's eyes glistened. "I think she'd want me to live. Really live. Not just exist." "She would." Clara kissed his cheek. "And I'm going to make sure you do. On the sixth day, everything changed. Clara was in the kitchen making lunch when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She grabbed the rifle by the door and moved to the window. "Thomas." Her voice was sharp. "Someone's coming." Thomas appeared beside her instantly. "One rider. Coming fast." They watched the horse approach. The rider was bent low over the saddle, pushing the animal hard. "It's not Harlan's men," Clara said. "Look at his clothes. He's not wearing a uniform." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Then who is he?" The rider pulled up in front of the house. He slid off the horse and staggered toward the porch. His face was bloody. His clothes were torn. "Clara." The man's voice cracked. "Clara, please. I know you're in there." Clara's face went white. "Oh, God." "Who is he?" Thomas demanded. Clara's hands started shaking. "It's Owen. My brother." Thomas's grip tightened on his rifle. "The brother who sold you?" "Yes." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "The brother who sold me." Owen collapsed on the porch steps. "Clara, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But you have to listen. Harlan's coming. Tonight. He's hired 20 men from the mining camps. Killers. All of them." Clara didn't move. "Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm dying." Owen coughed, and blood spattered his lips. "Harlan's men caught me sneaking out of his office. I stole his ledgers. The real ones. Everything he's been hiding." Thomas stepped forward. "Where are these ledgers?" Owen reached inside his coat and pulled out a leather-bound book. His hands left bloody smears on the cover. "Here. Everything's here. Enough to put him away forever." Thomas took the book and opened it. His eyes widened as he read. "This is everything. Land deals, murder contracts, bribery records. I know." Owen's head fell back against the porch railing. "I was his bookkeeper for 3 months. That's how I found out what he really is." Clara's voice was ice. "You sold me to him. You knew what he was, and you sold me anyway." Owen's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared. He threatened to kill me if I didn't pay what I owed. I didn't know what else to do. So you gave him your sister. I thought he'd treat you well." Owen started crying. "I thought you'd be safe. I didn't know he'd hurt you. I swear I didn't know." Clara stared at her brother. 3 years of rage boiled up inside her. 3 years of betrayal and pain and nightmares. She walked down the steps and stood over him. "Give me one reason not to let you bleed out right here." "Because I came back." Owen reached for her hand. "Because I couldn't live with what I did. Because you're my sister, and I love you. And I'm sorry. God, Clara, I'm so sorry." Clara looked at his bloody hand, then at his face, the brother she'd grown up with. The brother who'd taught her to ride horses and catch fireflies. The brother who'd held her when their father died. And the brother who'd destroyed her life. Thomas touched her shoulder. "Clara, we need to get him inside. If Harlan's really coming tonight, we need to know everything he knows." Clara closed her eyes. Her whole body shook. Then she took Owen's hand and helped him to his feet. "Come inside," she said. "But don't think for 1 second that this means I forgive you." Owen nodded weakly. "I know. I don't deserve forgiveness." "No." Clara's voice was cold. "You don't." They got Owen inside and laid him on the couch. Thomas examined his wounds while Clara stood by the window watching the horizon. 2 knife wounds, Thomas reported. Deep but not fatal. He'll live if we stop the bleeding. Clara said nothing. Thomas cleaned and bandaged Owen's injuries. When he was done, Owen grabbed his arm. "You have to get her out of here." Owen's voice was urgent. "Harlan's not coming to negotiate. He's coming to kill, both of you." "How many men?" Thomas asked. 20. Maybe more. All armed. And Harlan's leading them himself. When tonight? After dark. Owen coughed again. "He knows you sent that telegram. He's scared. A scared Victor Harlan is more dangerous than anything you've ever faced." Thomas stood and walked to Clara. She was still staring out the window. "We need to leave," Thomas said quietly. "No. Clara, he's bringing an army. We can't." I said no. Clara turned to face him. Her eyes blazed. "I'm done running. I ran from him for 3 years. I hid. I cowered. I let him make me feel like prey. This is different." "You're right. It is different." Clara grabbed his shirt. "Because now I have something to fight for. Someone to fight with. I'm not running anymore, Thomas. Not from Harlan. Not from anyone." Thomas looked into her eyes. He saw the same defiance he'd seen in the flooded cellar, the same fire that had made him fall in love with her. "Then we make a stand," he said. "We make a stand." From the couch, Owen struggled to sit up. "I can help. I know Harlan's plans, his weaknesses. Let me help." Clara walked over to her brother. She stood over him for a long moment. "You want to help?" Her voice was hard. "Yes." Owen's eyes were desperate. "Please, let me make this right." Clara grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him close. "If you betray us, if you so much as think about switching sides, I'll kill you myself. Do you understand?" Owen nodded frantically. "I understand." "Good." Clara released him. "Now tell us everything." For the next 2 hours, Owen laid out everything he knew. Harlan's men, their positions, their weapons, the signal they'd use to attack. By the time he finished, Thomas had a plan. "We can't hold the house," Thomas said. "Too exposed, too many windows." "Then where?" Clara asked. "The barn." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Stone foundation. 1 door. And I've got dynamite stored in the back from when I was clearing stumps." Clara's eyes widened. "You want to blow them up only if we have to." But the threat might be enough to make them think twice. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Clara loaded rifles while Thomas rigged the dynamite. Owen, despite his injuries, helped barricade the barn door. As the sun began to set, the 3 of them stood in the fortified barn surrounded by weapons and explosives. "Clara." Owen touched his sister's arm. "I need to say something." Clara stiffened. "What I was wrong. About everything." Owen's voice broke. "Selling you to Harlan was the worst thing I've ever done. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you." Clara didn't respond for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you remember when we were kids? When Father used to take us fishing at Miller's Creek?" Owen nodded slowly. "You always caught more fish than me, and you always pretended to be surprised." Clara almost smiled. "You were a terrible liar even then." "I still am. I know." Clara finally looked at him. "That's how I know you're telling the truth now." Owen's eyes filled with tears. "Does that mean—" "It means you get 1 chance?" Clara's voice hardened. "1. Don't waste it." "I won't." Owen grabbed her hand. "I swear I won't." Thomas appeared beside them. "They're coming." Clara moved to the window. Her breath caught. Torches. Dozens of them moving through the darkness like fireflies from hell. Harlan's army had arrived. Thomas handed Clara a rifle. "Remember what I taught you." "I remember." Owen pulled himself to his feet, ignoring his wounds. "Give me a gun." Thomas hesitated. Then he handed Owen a pistol. 6 shots. Make them count. The torches stopped about 100 yards from the barn. A voice boomed across the darkness. "Thomas Brennan." Victor Harlan's voice dripped with contempt. "You've caused me a lot of trouble." Thomas moved to the barn door. "The trouble's just beginning, Harlan. Hand over the girl and the ledgers. Do it now and I'll let you live. No deal. Then you'll die." Harlan laughed. "You think you can fight 20 men? You're one old rancher with a rifle." "Maybe." Thomas cocked his rifle. "But I've got something you don't." "What's that dynamite?" Silence from the torches. "You're bluffing," Harlan said. "Try me." Thomas's voice was ice. "Send your men in, and I blow this barn sky high. We all die together. Is that what you want?" More silence. Then whispering among the men. "You wouldn't kill yourself," Harlan said. Not for some whore. She's not a whore. Thomas's voice rose. She's the woman I love, and I'd rather die with her than watch you take her. Clara's heart stopped. Did he just say Thomas didn't look back? He kept his eyes on Harlan. Your choice, Harlan. Walk away now, and maybe we all live to see tomorrow. Stay, and we all burn. The torches wavered. Men were backing away. Then Harlan laughed again. You think I believe you'd actually light that fuse? You're not that crazy. Thomas pulled a match from his pocket. Try me. He struck it against the barn door. The flame flickered to life. Last chance, Harlan. Thomas's voice was deadly calm. Walk away. The torches scattered. Men were running now. Cowards, Harlan screamed. Get back here! Get back here! But his army was already fleeing into the darkness. Within minutes, only Harlan remained. This isn't over. Harlan spat. You hear me, Brennan? This isn't over. It is for tonight. Thomas blew out the match. Go home, Harlan, and pray the federal marshal gets here before I decide to finish this myself. Harlan stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and disappeared into the darkness. Clara collapsed against the barn wall. Her whole body was shaking. Thomas. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. You said you loved me. Thomas knelt beside her. I meant it. You never said it before. I was scared. Thomas touched her face. I spent 7 years being dead inside. And then you showed up and made me feel things I thought I'd never feel again. I love you, Clara Weston. I think I've loved you since the moment you grabbed my shirt and told me you were choosing me. Clara pulled him close. I love you too, she whispered. I didn't know I could still love anyone. But I love you. They held each other in the dim barn, while Owen watched from the corner, tears running down his own face. Outside, the darkness was silent. But somewhere out there, Victor Harlan was already planning his next move. And this time, he wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating them. 3 days passed after the standoff at the barn. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of jumping at every sound. Clara hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time. Neither had Thomas. Owen's wounds were healing slowly, but infection had set in. He spent most of his time on the couch, drifting in and out of fever dreams. On the 4th morning, Thomas found Clara sitting by the window before dawn. You should rest, he said. I can't. Clara's voice was hollow. Every time I close my eyes, I see torches. I see Harlan's face. Thomas sat down beside her. The marshal should be here any day now. And if he's not? Clara turned to look at him. What if Harlan got to him first? What if he's bought the marshal like he bought everyone else? He can't buy federal law. He's bought everything else. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. The sheriff, the judge, the bank. What makes you think a federal marshal is any different? Thomas took her hands. Because I served with Marshal Dawson in the cavalry. He's the most honest man I've ever known. If he says he's coming, he's coming. Clara wanted to believe him. She really did. But 3 years of running from Harlan had taught her that hope was dangerous. What if we're wrong? She whispered. What if this doesn't work? Then we run. Thomas squeezed her hands. I've got money hidden. Enough to get us to California. We disappear. Start over. And abandon everything you've built here. I'd abandon anything for you. Thomas met her eyes. Don't you understand that by now Clara felt tears prick her eyes? I don't deserve you. You deserve everything. Thomas pulled her close. And I'm going to make sure you get it. A groan from the couch interrupted them. Owen was trying to sit up, his face slick with sweat. Clara rushed to his side. Don't move. You'll tear your stitches. Water! Owen's voice was a rasp. Please. Clara brought him a cup. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. How do you feel? She asked. Like I've been stabbed twice. Owen almost smiled. Which I suppose I have. Clara didn't smile back. Your fever's worse. I'll live. Owen grabbed her wrist. Clara, I need to tell you something. You need to rest. No. Listen. Owen's eyes were urgent despite the fever. Harlan's not going to wait for the marshal. He can't afford to. Those ledgers I stole, they implicate too many people. Powerful people. If that evidence reaches a federal court, half the territory's leadership goes to prison. Clara's blood chilled. What are you saying? I'm saying he's going to make a move. Soon. Before the marshal arrives. Owen coughed and blood flecked his lips. He's probably already planning it. Thomas appeared beside them. What kind of move? The worst kind. Owen closed his eyes. He's going to burn you out. Kill everyone who can testify against him. Make it look like an accident or an Indian raid. Then destroy the evidence. He wouldn't dare, Clara said. The whole territory would know. The whole territory is scared of him. Owen opened his eyes. Fear buys silence, Clara. You know that better than anyone. Clara stood up. Her whole body was shaking. Then we don't wait. Her voice hardened. We go to him first. Thomas grabbed her arm. What? We've been playing defense. Clara turned to face him. Waiting. Hiding. Hoping someone else will save us. I'm done hoping. If Harlan's coming for us, we need to strike first. That's suicide. No. It's war. Clara's eyes blazed. And I'd rather die fighting than die cowering. Thomas stared at her. This wasn't the half-drowned woman he'd pulled from a flooded cellar. This was someone else entirely. Someone forged in fire. What do you have in mind? He asked. The ledgers aren't enough. Clara started pacing. We need witnesses. People who can testify to what Harlan's done. Everyone's too scared to talk. Not everyone. Clara stopped and looked at Thomas. What about the settlers he displaced? The families he drove off their land? Most of them left the territory years ago. But not all of them. Clara's mind was racing. There was a woman. Martha Hendricks. Her husband disappeared after refusing to sell their farm to Harlan. She's still here. Still waiting for justice. Thomas frowned. How do you know about Martha Hendricks? Because I was Harlan's prisoner for 3 months. Clara's voice dropped. He used to brag about his conquests. The people he'd broken. The families he'd destroyed. Martha Hendricks was one of them. Do you know where she lives north end of town? Above the general store. Clara grabbed Thomas's hands. If we can get her to testify to tell the marshal what really happened to her husband, it might be enough to convince others to come forward. Thomas considered this. It's risky. Harlan has men watching the town. Everything is risky. Clara squeezed his hands. But I'm done hiding, Thomas. I'm done letting fear dictate my life. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. We go tonight. Owen struggled to his feet. I'm coming with you. You can barely stand, Clara said. I know Harlan's patrol patterns. Owen steadied himself against the couch. I know which streets his men avoid. Without me, you'll be caught before you reach the general store. Clara hesitated. Then she looked at Thomas. He's right, Thomas admitted. We need him. Clara turned back to her brother. One sign of betrayal. One hint that you're leading us into a trap. And I'll kill you myself. I know. Owen met her eyes. I'm not betraying you, Clara. Not this time. Not ever again. Clara held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Get some rest. We leave at midnight. They approached town from the east using the dry creek bed as cover. Owen led the way despite his injuries, his knowledge of Harlan's operations proving invaluable. 2 men on Main Street. Owen whispered. They rotate every hour. We have maybe 15 minutes before the next shift. Thomas nodded. Move. They slipped through the darkness like ghosts. Clara's heart pounded so loud she was sure the whole town could hear it. The general store loomed ahead. A lamp burned in the window above, casting a faint glow into the street. That's her place, Owen said. Martha Hendricks. She never turns that lamp off. Some say she's still waiting for her husband to come home. Clara felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to wait for someone who would never return. "I'll go up alone," Clara said. Thomas grabbed her arm. "No, she won't talk to two strange men in the middle of the night." Clara touched his face. "But she might talk to another woman, especially one who understands what Harlan is capable of." Thomas wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to keep Clara close, but he knew she was right. "5 minutes," he said. "If you're not back in 5 minutes, I'm coming up. Deal." Clara slipped through the alley beside the store. A wooden staircase led to the apartment above. She climbed slowly, testing each step for creaks. The door at the top was plain and weathered. Clara knocked softly. No response. She knocked again. "Mrs. Hendricks." "My name is Clara Weston. I need to talk to you about Victor Harlan." Silence. Then the sound of shuffling feet. The door cracked open, revealing a weathered face and suspicious eyes. "Who sent you?" Martha Hendricks' voice was a harsh whisper. "No one sent me. I escaped from Harlan 3 weeks ago. He kept me prisoner, used me like property." Martha's eyes widened slightly. Then she opened the door wider. "Come inside. Quick." Clara stepped into a small, cramped room. A single lamp flickered on a table covered in papers and photographs. Martha closed the door and turned to face her. "You're the girl everyone's talking about. The one living with the rancher." "Yes. Harlan's offering a reward for your return. $500. "I know." Martha studied her for a long moment. "Why are you here?" "Because I need your help." Clara stepped closer. "I know what Harlan did to your husband. I know he disappeared after refusing to sell your farm." Martha's face went pale. "Who told you that Harlan himself?" Clara's voice softened. "He used to brag about the people he'd destroyed. Your husband was one of them." "I'm sorry." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "John's been gone 6 years. Everyone says he ran off, abandoned me. But I know the truth. Harlan killed him and buried him somewhere on that railroad land. Can you prove it?" Martha hesitated. Then she walked to a loose floorboard and pried it up. She pulled out a worn leather pouch. John's pocket watch. Martha opened the pouch. They found it in the foundation of Harlan's new rail station. "A worker snuck it to me 3 years ago, said he was too scared to testify, but thought I deserved to know the truth." Clara stared at the watch. "This is evidence. It's not enough." Martha shook her head. "One watch doesn't prove murder. And I'm just a widow living above a store. Who's going to believe me over Victor Harlan?" "What if there were others?" Clara grabbed Martha's hands. "Other people willing to testify. Other evidence. Ledgers documenting Harlan's crimes." "Would you come forward then?" Martha's hands trembled. "You don't understand. Harlan owns this town. He owns the sheriff, the judge, everyone. If I speak out, I'm dead. The federal marshal is coming." Clara's voice was urgent. "A real lawman who can't be bought. But he needs witnesses. He needs people brave enough to tell the truth." Martha pulled her hands away. "I've spent 6 years being a coward. 6 years keeping my head down and my mouth shut while Harlan destroyed other families the same way he destroyed mine. Then help me stop him." Clara stepped closer. "Help me make sure no other woman has to wait by the window for a husband who's never coming home." Martha's tears spilled over. She looked at Clara with something that might have been hope. "There are others," Martha whispered. "Families Harlan drove out. Some of them are still in the territory. Hiding. Scared. Can you contact them?" "Maybe. If I had time." "You have until the marshal arrives." Clara grabbed her shoulders. "Please, Martha, I can't do this alone." Martha looked at the pocket watch in her hand, then at Clara, then at the lamp in the window. "For John," she whispered. "I'll do it for John." Clara pulled her into an embrace. "Thank you." A shout from the street below shattered the moment. "Clara." Thomas's voice was strained. "We've got company." Clara ran to the window. Her blood froze. 6 men surrounded Thomas and Owen. Harlan himself sat on horseback, a torch in his hand. "Did you really think I wouldn't have this place watched?" Harlan's voice boomed through the darkness. "Bring her down, now, or I burn the building with everyone inside." Clara's mind raced. No time to run. No way to fight. She turned to Martha. "Is there another way out?" "The roof." Martha was already moving. "There's a gap between the buildings. You can jump to the hotel next door." "What about Thomas?" Clara hesitated. Her heart screamed at her to stay to fight to die beside the man she loved. But if she was captured, everything they'd worked for was lost. "Go." Martha pushed her toward the back window. "I'll distract them. Go." Clara climbed out onto the roof. The gap between buildings was narrow but deep. One wrong step, and she'd fall to her death. She jumped. For one terrifying moment, she was suspended in darkness. Then her hands caught the edge of the hotel roof. She pulled herself up, gasping. Below, she heard Harlan's men kicking in Martha's door. Clara ran. She dropped down through a skylight into an empty hotel room. Down the stairs. Out the back entrance. The alley was dark, silent. Clara pressed herself against the wall, trying to control her breathing. Thomas was captured. Owen was captured. She was alone. And then she heard it. The sound of a horse approaching from the west. Clara tensed. She had no weapon, no plan. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man in a long coat badge glinting on his chest. Clara Weston. The man's voice was calm. "I'm Marshal James Dawson. Thomas Brennan told me you might need some help." Clara nearly collapsed with relief. The marshal. He was here. They have Thomas. Clara's voice cracked. "Harlan's men captured him at the general store." "I know." Dawson dismounted. "I've been watching. I've also been gathering witnesses for the past 2 days. Thomas's telegram gave me enough names to start with." 2 days, Clara grabbed his arm. "You've been here for 2 days. I needed evidence. Proper evidence that would hold up in federal court." Dawson's eyes were hard. "Victor Harlan has powerful friends. If I arrested him without ironclad proof, he'd be free within a week. But Thomas is stronger than he looks." Dawson pulled a rifle from his saddle. "Right now, I need you to show me where Harlan keeps his real records. The ones your brother stole. They're at Thomas's ranch, hidden under the floorboards." "Good." Dawson mounted his horse and offered Clara his hand. "Then let's go get them. And then we're going to bring Victor Harlan to justice." Clara grabbed his hand and swung up behind him. "What about Thomas Harlan won't kill him?" "Not yet." Dawson kicked his horse into motion. "He needs Thomas as leverage. As long as Harlan thinks you'll trade yourself for Thomas, he'll keep him alive. And if he doesn't, then we'll have another charge to add to his list." Dawson's voice hardened. "Murder." They reached the ranch in an hour. Clara found the ledgers exactly where Thomas had hidden them. Dawson spent 30 minutes reading through them. His face grew darker with every page. Good God. Dawson finally looked up. Harlan's been running a criminal empire for 15 years. Murder, extortion, bribery, land fraud. This is enough to hang him 10 times over. Then let's go get him. Not yet. Dawson held up his hand. I sent word to the territorial governor before I came here. He's sending a company of soldiers. They should arrive by dawn. We can't wait until dawn. Clara's voice rose. Harlan could kill Thomas at any moment. If we go in now with just the 2 of us, we'll be killed. Dawson met her eyes. And Thomas will die anyway. We wait for the soldiers. Clara wanted to scream. Every second that passed was another second Thomas spent in Harlan's hands. But she knew Dawson was right. Then we wait, she whispered. But if Thomas dies because of this delay, I'll never forgive you. Fair enough. Dawson nodded. Now tell me everything you know about Harlan's compound. Layout, guard positions, everything. Clara spent the next 3 hours describing every detail she could remember from her months as Harlan's prisoner. The guards who rotated every 4 hours. The secret entrance through the wine cellar. The room where Harlan kept his most valuable prisoners. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking, and with it came the sound of hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Clara ran to the window. Her heart soared. Soldiers. A full company of federal cavalry riding in formation toward the ranch. Dawson walked outside to meet them. Clara watched as he spoke with the commanding officer, gesturing toward town. Within minutes, the soldiers were forming up. Dawson returned to Clara. "It's time." Clara grabbed a rifle from Thomas's rack. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. He's my man." Clara's eyes blazed. "I'm not sitting here while you rescue him." Dawson hesitated. Then he sighed. "Stay behind the soldiers. Don't do anything stupid." Clara smiled grimly. No promises. They rode toward town as the sun crept over the horizon. 40 soldiers, 1 marshal, and 1 woman who would burn the world down to save the man she loved. Harlan's compound sat on the north end of town. A stone wall surrounded the main house with guards posted at every entrance. But as the cavalry approached, something strange happened. The gates opened. Harlan walked out alone, hands raised. "Marshal Dawson," Harlan's voice carried across the morning air. "I've been expecting you." Dawson dismounted, hand on his pistol. "Victor Harlan, you're under arrest for murder, extortion, fraud, and attempted murder." "Of course I am." Harlan smiled. "But before you take me in, I think you should know something." "What's that?" "Your friend, Thomas Brennan, is dead." Harlan's smile widened. "Tried to escape last night. My men had no choice but to shoot him." Clara's world stopped. "No." She jumped off her horse and ran toward the gate. "Clara, stop!" Dawson shouted. But Clara didn't hear him. She pushed past Harlan and into the compound. "Thomas!" She screamed his name. "Thomas! In here!" The voice was weak, barely audible. But Clara would recognize it anywhere. She ran toward a small building near the back wall, kicked the door open. Thomas was inside, alive, bloody and beaten, but alive. Clara. Thomas's face crumpled when he saw her. "I thought you were dead." Clara threw herself into his arms. She didn't care about the blood, didn't care about anything except the feeling of his heart beating against hers. "He said you were dead." Clara was crying now. "He said his men shot you." "Harlan lies." Thomas held her tightly. "He's been lying his whole life." Outside, they heard Harlan's voice rise in protest as Dawson clamped iron shackles on his wrists. "You can't do this," Harlan screamed. "I own this territory. I own the governor. You own nothing now." Dawson's voice was cold. "Victor Harlan, you're going to hang." Clara helped Thomas out of the building. They watched together as soldiers dragged Harlan toward a prison wagon. Harlan's eyes found Clara. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You hear me? This isn't—" A soldier slammed the wagon door shut, cutting off his words. Dawson approached Clara and Thomas. "It's over." Clara looked at the man she loved. Beaten, broken, but alive. She kissed him. Hard and desperate and full of everything she'd been too scared to say. When she pulled back, Thomas was crying. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "Never." Clara touched his face. "I will never leave you. 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, for the rest of our lives." Thomas pulled her close. "For the rest of our lives." Owen appeared from behind the soldiers, supported by 2 cavalrymen. His face was swollen, his arm in a makeshift sling. "Clara." Owen's voice broke. "I'm sorry, they caught me before I could—" "You came back." Clara reached out and squeezed his hand. "That's what matters." Owen looked at her with tears streaming down his face. "Does that mean— it means you have a lot of work to do?" Clara almost smiled. "But you're still my brother." Owen nodded frantically. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I swear." Clara turned back to Thomas. His face was pale. His legs were trembling. "We need to get you home," she said. "Home?" Thomas smiled weakly. "I like the sound of that." Clara wrapped her arm around his waist. Let's go. They walked out of Harlan's compound together, leaving behind 3 years of fear and pain and running. Ahead of them, the sun was rising. And for the first time since she'd been sold like property, Clara Weston finally felt free. The ride back to the ranch nearly killed Thomas. Clara held him upright on the horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, feeling his body grow weaker with every mile. By the time they reached the house, Thomas could barely keep his eyes open. Stay with me. Clara's voice cracked. Thomas, stay with me. I'm trying. Thomas's words were slurred. Just need to rest. They got him inside and onto the bed. Clara stripped off his bloody shirt and gasped. His chest was covered in bruises. Deep purple and black marks where Harlan's men had beaten him. 2 ribs were clearly broken, pushing against his skin at wrong angles. Oh, God. Clara's hands shook. Thomas, why didn't you tell me? Didn't want to worry you. Thomas tried to smile. Besides, I've had worse. You're a terrible liar. Clara spent the next hour cleaning his wounds. She wrapped his ribs as best she could, remembering what Thomas had taught her during their weeks together. Owen appeared in the doorway. The doctor's on his way. Marshal Dawson sent for him. Good. Clara didn't look up. How are your injuries? I'll live. Owen hesitated. Clara, I need to tell you something. Not now. It's important. Owen stepped into the room. Before they captured me, I heard Harlan's men talking. About Thomas. Clara's hands stilled. What did they say? They were laughing about how long he'd last. Owen's voice dropped. They said a man his age couldn't survive what they did to him. They said he'd be dead within a week. Clara's blood went cold. She looked at Thomas's face, pale, drawn, older than she'd ever seen him look. Get out, she whispered. Clara, I said get out. Clara's voice rose. Leave us alone. Owen backed out of the room and closed the door. Clara climbed onto the bed beside Thomas. She pressed her body against his, careful of his broken ribs. You're not going to die. Her voice was fierce. Do you hear me? I didn't go through all of this just to lose you now. Thomas's hand found hers. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. I promise. But even as he said the words, Clara could feel his heart beating too fast, his skin burning too hot. Something was wrong. The doctor arrived an hour later, an older man named Patterson who'd served in the army with Thomas decades ago. He examined Thomas for 20 minutes. Clara paced outside the bedroom door, wearing a path in the wooden floor. When Patterson finally emerged, his face was grim. How bad? Clara asked. Bad. Patterson wiped his hands on a cloth. 3 broken ribs, internal bruising, possible damage to his liver and kidneys. But he'll recover. Patterson hesitated. That's not the main problem. Then what is his heart? Patterson's voice dropped. Thomas has been pushing himself too hard for too long. The stress of the past few weeks combined with the beating he took, it's put tremendous strain on his heart. What does that mean? It means if he doesn't rest completely for at least 2 weeks, his heart could give out. Patterson met Clara's eyes. No work, no stress, no physical exertion of any kind. Complete bed rest. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. 2 weeks minimum. And even then, there's no guarantee. Patterson put a hand on her shoulder. I've known Thomas for 30 years. He's the toughest man I've ever met, but he's also 52 years old. The body can only take so much. Can I see him? He's sleeping now. That's the best thing for him. Patterson picked up his bag. I'll come back tomorrow to check on him. In the meantime, keep him still and keep him calm. Clara nodded numbly. Thank you. Patterson left. Clara stood alone in the hallway trying to process what she'd just heard. Thomas's heart could give out. The man who had saved her life, the man who had fought for her, killed for her, nearly died for her. That man could be taken from her at any moment. Clara walked into the bedroom. Thomas was asleep, his breathing shallow and uneven. She sat down beside the bed and took his hand. "This is my fault," she whispered. "You were fine before I came. You were surviving, and then I dragged you into my mess and nearly got you killed." Thomas's hand twitched in hers, but he didn't wake. Clara stayed by his side all night. The next morning, Owen found Clara exactly where she'd been when he left. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. "No." "Clara, you can't. I'm not leaving him." Clara's voice was hollow. "He didn't leave me when I was dying. I'm not leaving him." Owen knelt beside her. "Let me take a shift. You need to eat. You need to rest." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." Owen touched her arm. "You're running on fear and guilt and nothing else. That's not going to help him." Clara wanted to argue, but she was so tired, so scared. 2 hours, she said finally. "Wake me if anything changes." "I will." Clara stumbled to the couch and collapsed. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. She woke to the sound of coughing. Violent, racking coughs that seemed to shake the whole house. Clara was on her feet and running before she was fully awake. Thomas was sitting up in bed, coughing so hard his whole body convulsed. Blood spattered the sheets in front of him. "Thomas!" Clara grabbed his shoulders. "Thomas, look at me!" The coughing subsided slowly. Thomas looked up at her with bloodshot eyes. "I'm all right," he rasped. "Just a cough. That's not just a cough. You're coughing blood. It's nothing." Thomas tried to wave her off. "I've had worse. Stop saying that." Clara's voice cracked. "Stop pretending you're invincible. You're not invincible, Thomas. You're human, and you're scaring me." Thomas looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, Clara saw fear in his eyes too. "I know," he whispered. "I'm scared too." Clara climbed onto the bed and wrapped her arms around him. Thomas buried his face in her neck. "I don't know how to be weak," he said. "I've spent my whole life being strong. For the army. For Margaret. For myself. I don't know how to let someone take care of me. Then let me teach you." Clara pulled back and looked into his eyes. "You taught me how to shoot, how to ride, how to survive. Now let me teach you how to heal." Thomas's eyes glistened. "I don't deserve you. That's not your decision to make." Clara kissed his forehead. "Now lie back down. Doctor's orders." Thomas let her ease him back onto the pillows. For once, he didn't argue. Clara pulled the bloody sheets off the bed and replaced them with clean ones. She brought Thomas water and made him drink slowly. 3 times a day, she whispered. "Morning, noon, and night. That's still my promise." Thomas almost smiled. "I thought the deal was off." "The deal is off." Clara touched his face. "Now it's just love." For the next week, Clara barely left Thomas's side. She cooked his meals and fed them to him 1 spoonful at a time. She changed his bandages and cleaned his wounds. She read to him from old books she found on his shelves. She held his hand when the nightmares came. And slowly Thomas began to recover. The color returned to his face. His coughing subsided. His breathing grew stronger. But the damage ran deeper than broken ribs and bruised organs. On the 5th night, Clara woke to find Thomas sitting by the window staring into the darkness. "You should be in bed," she said. "Couldn't sleep." Thomas didn't turn around. "Too many ghosts." Clara walked over and sat beside him. "What kind of ghosts?" "The men I killed. At the compound. In the standoff." Thomas's voice was hollow. I'd forgotten what it felt like. Taking a life. I'd spent 7 years trying to forget. "You did what you had to do." "Did I?" Thomas finally looked at her. "Or did I just fall back into old patterns?" "Violence was always easy for me, Clara. Too easy. That's why I came out here. To get away from it. to find peace. Clara took his hand. You found something better than peace. You found me. Thomas almost smiled. That's true. And those men weren't innocent. Clara squeezed his hand. They were killers. They would have murdered us without a second thought. I know, Thomas sighed. But that doesn't make it easier. Every face I see in my dreams, I wonder if they had families. Wives, children, people who loved them. You can't carry that burden. Someone has to. Clara turned his face toward hers. Listen to me. You're not a monster. You're a man who fought to protect the woman he loves. There's no shame in that. There's no guilt in that. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Margaret used to say the same thing. After I came back from the war, she used to hold me when the nightmares came and tell me I wasn't a monster. She was right. I know. Thomas pulled Clara close. But it took me 7 years to believe her. And then she died and I forgot everything she taught me. You didn't forget. Clara wrapped her arms around him. You just buried it, along with everything else you were afraid to feel. They held each other in the darkness. Outside, an owl hooted somewhere in the distance. I need to tell you something, Thomas said finally. What? When Harlan's men had me before the marshal came, they offered me a deal. Clara pulled back. What kind of deal? Give you up. Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. Tell them where you were hiding. In exchange, they'd let me live. Let me keep the ranch. Pretend none of this ever happened. Clara's heart stopped. What did you say? Thomas met her eyes. I told them to go to hell, and then they beat me until I couldn't stand. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Thomas, I would have died for you. Thomas touched her face. Do you understand that I would have let them kill me rather than betray you? Because you're not just some woman I saved from a cellar. You're everything, Clara. You're the reason I want to live again. Clara kissed him, soft and desperate, and full of everything she couldn't put into words. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much it terrifies me. Good. Thomas almost smiled. I'm terrified too. On the 10th day, Thomas tried to get out of bed. Clara caught him halfway to the door. What do you think you're doing? Going to check on the horses. Thomas's voice was stubborn. They need to be fed. Owen's been feeding them. Get back in bed. I'm fine. You're not fine. Clara blocked his path. You almost died, Thomas. Your heart almost gave out. And now you want to go muck stalls. I can't just lie here. Thomas's frustration boiled over. I've never been useless in my life. I don't know how to do nothing. Then learn. Clara grabbed his arm. Because if you don't, you're going to die. And I'm not going to lose you because you're too stubborn to rest. Thomas glared at her. She glared back. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Thomas's shoulders slumped. Fine. He let her lead him back to bed. But I don't have to like it. No one asked you to like it. Clara tucked the blankets around him. Just do it. You're bossy. You love it. Thomas almost smiled. Maybe I do. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. She took his hand and held it against her cheek. I know this is hard for you. Her voice softened. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Margaret. The soldiers in your unit. Me. It's hard to let someone take care of you for a change. It's not hard. Thomas's voice cracked. It's impossible. Nothing's impossible. Clara kissed his palm. You taught me that. Thomas pulled her down beside him. She curled against his side, careful of his healing ribs. Stay with me, he whispered. Always. They lay together in comfortable silence. Thomas's breathing slowly evened out. He was almost asleep when Clara spoke again. Thomas. When you're better, I want you to marry me. Thomas's eyes snapped open. What? You heard me. Clara propped herself up on one elbow. I want to be your wife. Not because of some deal we made. Not because I feel obligated. Because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Thomas stared at her. Clara, I know what you're going to say. Clara cut him off. I'm too young. People will talk. You're not good enough for me. I've heard all of it. And I don't care. That's not... Let me finish. Clara's eyes blazed. I've spent 3 years having men make decisions for me. My brother, Harlan. Everyone thought they knew what was best for me, but nobody asked what I wanted. Thomas was silent. I want you. Clara's voice broke. I want this ranch. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to have children with you. I want to grow old with you. And I don't care if I have to fight the whole world to make it happen. Thomas reached up and touched her face. His hand was trembling. You don't have to fight the world, he said quietly. Then what do I have to fight? Nothing. Thomas smiled. Because my answer is yes. Clara's heart stopped. Yes. Yes. Thomas pulled her down and kissed her. Yes. I'll marry you. Yes. I'll spend the rest of my life with you. Yes, to everything. Clara laughed through her tears. You're supposed to ask me. You already asked. Thomas grinned. I'm just saying yes. That's not how it works. It's how it works for us. Clara kissed him again, then again, and again. When she finally pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. Doctor said no physical exertion, Clara reminded him. Then stop kissing me like that. Never. They held each other until the sun began to set. Clara's head rested on Thomas's chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady now. Strong. Thomas. Clara spoke without lifting her head. Yes, thank you. For what? For hearing me scream. Clara pressed closer to him. For breaking down that cellar door. For choosing to save me, when you could have looked the other way. Thomas stroked her hair. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when it comes to you. Thomas kissed the top of her head. The moment I saw you, something broke inside me. All those walls I'd built, all those years of hiding from the world, they just crumbled. That sounds painful. It was. Thomas smiled against her hair. Best pain of my life. Owen knocked on the door an hour later. Sorry to interrupt, he said. But there's someone here to see you. Clara sat up. Who? Marshal Dawson? Owen shifted uncomfortably. He says it's important. Clara looked at Thomas. He nodded. Send him in. Dawson entered the bedroom, hat in hand. His face was serious. Thomas. Clara. Dawson nodded at each of them. I have news about Harlan. Clara's stomach clenched. What kind of news? He's been transferred to Helena for trial. Dawson's voice was measured. The territorial judge refused to hear the case. Said there was too much conflict of interest. That's good. Thomas pushed himself up against the pillows. A Helena judge won't be in Harlan's pocket. That's what we thought. Dawson paused. But there's a complication. What complication? Harlan's hired the best lawyer in the territory. A man named Pemberton. He's already filed motions to have most of the evidence thrown out. Claims it was obtained illegally. Clara felt ice spreading through her veins. Can he do that? He can try. Dawson met her eyes. That's why I need you both to testify, in person, at the trial in Helena, when 3 weeks. Clara looked at Thomas. 3 weeks. Would he be strong enough? We'll be there, Thomas said. Thomas. Clara started. We'll be there. Thomas's voice was firm. Harlan tried to kill us. Tried to destroy everything we built. I'm not letting some lawyer get him off. Dawson nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Martha Hendricks, the widow you recruited. She's agreed to testify too. And she's convinced 6 other families to come forward. Clara's heart lifted. 6 families. Harlan's been terrorizing this territory for 15 years. Dawson almost smiled. Turns out a lot of people have been waiting for a chance to fight back. Clara looked at Thomas. He squeezed her hand. Thank you, Marshal. Clara's voice was steady. We'll be ready. Dawson put his hat on and walked out. Owen appeared in the doorway after he left. You're really going to Helena? We're really going. Clara stood up. All of us. Owen's eyes widened. Me too. You're a witness too. Clara walked over to her brother. And besides, someone needs to help me keep Thomas in line. I heard that Thomas called from the bed. You were supposed to. Owen looked at Clara for a long moment. Then his face crumpled. I don't deserve this. His voice broke. I don't deserve your forgiveness, your trust, any of it. Clara put her hand on his shoulder. You're right, you don't. Owen flinched. But I'm giving it to you anyway. Clara squeezed his shoulder. Because that's what family does. We forgive each other, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Owen's tears spilled over. I won't let you down. I swear I won't let you down again. I know. Clara pulled him into a hug. I know. From the bed, Thomas watched them. Two siblings who had been torn apart by betrayal slowly finding their way back to each other. It gave him hope. If Clara could forgive the brother who sold her, maybe he could forgive himself too. Maybe they all could. That night, Clara lay beside Thomas in the darkness. Are you scared? Thomas asked. Of the trial, of everything. Thomas turned to look at her. 3 weeks ago, you were drowning in a cellar. Now you're about to testify against the most powerful man in the territory in front of a federal judge. Clara considered the question. I used to be scared all the time, every day with Harlan, every night in that house. Fear was the only thing I felt. And now I feel something different. Clara moved closer to him. I feel angry. I feel determined. And I feel loved. Thomas wrapped his arm around her. I do love you. I know. Clara smiled in the darkness. That's why I'm not scared anymore. Because whatever happens, I won't be facing it alone. You'll never be alone again. Promise. Thomas kissed her forehead. I promise. They fell asleep in each other's arms, and for the first time in 3 weeks, neither of them had nightmares. The journey to Helena took 4 days. Thomas insisted on riding despite Clara's protests. His ribs had healed enough to sit a horse, but every jolt sent pain shooting through his chest. He didn't complain, didn't slow down, just kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Clara rode beside him, watching him constantly. You're pushing too hard, she said on the second day. I'm fine. You're not fine. Clara grabbed his reins and forced both horses to stop. You're pale. You're sweating. And you've been clenching your jaw for the past 3 miles. Thomas wanted to argue, but she was right. 5 minutes, he said. Then we keep moving. 10 minutes. Clara dismounted. And you're drinking water whether you want to or not. Owen rode up behind them. Everything okay? Thomas is being stubborn. Clara pulled a canteen from her saddlebag. What else is new? Thomas accepted the water. His hands were shaking slightly. Clara noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything. How bad is the pain? She asked quietly. Manageable. Thomas sighed. It's worse than yesterday. Better than last week. I'll survive. Surviving isn't good enough. Clara took his hand. I need you to live. Really live. Not just push through until your body gives out. I know. Thomas squeezed her hand. But I have to do this. Harlan tried to destroy us. I have to look him in the eye and make sure he pays for it. Clara understood. She felt the same rage burning in her own chest. Together, she said. We do this together. Together. They reached Helena on the afternoon of the 4th day. Marshal Dawson met them at the edge of town. His face was grim. There's a problem, Dawson said. Clara's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Harlan's lawyer filed a motion this morning. He's claiming that Clara was never legally Harlan's property, that the sale was invalid. That should be good news, Thomas said. It would be. Except Pemberton is using it to argue that Harlan never had any motive to harm Clara, that everything that happened was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Clara's voice rose. He locked me in a cellar to drown. He had Thomas beaten half to death. How is that a misunderstanding, Pemberton's good? Dawson's jaw tightened. He's twisting everything, making Harlan look like a businessman who got caught up in a property dispute gone wrong. Clara felt rage boiling up inside her. After everything they'd been through, after all the pain and fear and sacrifice, and now some lawyer was going to twist the truth until Harlan walked free. "What do we do?" Thomas asked. "You testify." Dawson met Clara's eyes. "Both of you. Tell the judge exactly what happened. Every detail, every horror. Make him see the truth. And if that's not enough, then we lose." Dawson's voice was heavy. "And Harlan goes free." Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, running through her testimony in her mind. Every word had to be perfect. Every detail had to be clear. Thomas stirred beside her. "Can't sleep either." "No." Thomas pulled her close. "What are you afraid of?" "That I'll freeze." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "That I'll see Harlan's face and forget everything I planned to say." "You won't freeze." "How do you know?" "Because you're the bravest person I've ever met." Thomas kissed her forehead. "You survived 3 years of hell. You escaped a flooded cellar. You shot a man off his horse to save my life. Testifying in court is nothing compared to what you've already done." Clara wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, coiled in her stomach like a snake. "What if nobody believes me?" she whispered. "What if they think I'm just some woman making up stories? Then they're fools." Thomas propped himself up on one elbow. "Clara, look at me." She turned to face him. "You're not just some woman." Thomas's voice was fierce. "You're a survivor, a fighter, the woman I love. And tomorrow, you're going to walk into that courtroom and tell the truth. That's all you have to do. Tell the truth. And if the truth isn't enough, then we'll find another way." Thomas touched her face. "But I believe in you. I believe in us. And I believe that justice exists even when it's hard to find." Clara felt tears prickling her eyes. "I love you. I love you too." Thomas kissed her softly. "Now try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Clara closed her eyes. She focused on the sound of Thomas's heartbeat, steady and strong. Eventually sleep came. The courtroom was packed. Clara stood outside the doors, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. Thomas stood beside her, his hand warm on her back. Owen waited nearby, his face pale but determined. "You can do this." Thomas's voice was low. "Just tell the truth." Clara nodded. She took a deep breath. The doors opened. The courtroom fell silent as Clara walked down the center aisle. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, judging, assessing, waiting. And at the defendant's table, Victor Harlan sat in chains. His eyes found Clara immediately. He smiled. Clara's blood ran cold. That smile. She knew that smile. It was the smile he'd worn when he told her she belonged to him. The smile he'd worn when he locked her in the cellar. She forced herself to keep walking. The judge's voice boomed through the silence. "The court will come to order. We're here to hear testimony in the case of the United States versus Victor Harlan." Clara took her seat. Thomas settled beside her. Marshal Dawson leaned over. "You're first on the witness list. Be ready." Clara nodded. Her throat felt tight. The prosecutor stood, a young man named Harrison with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. "Your Honor, I call Clara Weston to the stand." Clara stood. Her legs felt like water. She walked to the witness chair and sat down. The bailiff approached with a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Harrison approached. "Miss Weston, can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Clara took a deep breath. 3 years ago, my brother sold me to Victor Harlan to pay his gambling debts." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "And what happened after this sale?" Harrison asked. I was taken to Harlan's compound. Clara's voice was steady despite her pounding heart. I was told I would be his wife, his property, that I had no choice in the matter. Did you agree to this arrangement? I refused. And how did the defendant respond to your refusal? He locked me in a root cellar. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. He flooded it with water. He told me I would stay there until I agreed to marry him or drowned. How long were you in that cellar? 3 days. Another murmur, louder this time. Harrison nodded. And how did you escape? I didn't escape. Clara looked directly at Thomas. I was rescued. By Thomas Brennan. And after your rescue, what happened? Harlan sent men to Thomas's ranch. They attacked us, shot at us, burned his hay barn. Objection. Pemberton rose from Harlan's table. There's no evidence linking my client to any barn fire. Sustained. The judge frowned. The witness will confine her testimony to events she personally witnessed. Clara's jaw tightened. But she continued. On the night of October 15th, Victor Harlan personally led an armed group to Thomas Brennan's ranch. I saw him. He threatened to kill us both if I didn't surrender to him. And what was your response? I refused. Clara lifted her chin. I told him I'd rather die than belong to him. What happened next? Thomas Brennan held them off, with a rifle and a threat of dynamite. Harlan's men fled. Pemberton stood again. Your Honor, this is all very dramatic, but it's one woman's word against a respected businessman. Where's the evidence? Harrison smiled. I'm glad you asked, Mr. Pemberton. He turned to the bailiff. Please admit Exhibit A. The ledgers recovered from the defendant's office. A leather-bound book was carried to the judge's bench, the same book Owen had stolen. The judge examined it for several minutes. His expression grew darker with every page. These are detailed records of illegal land purchases, Harrison said. Forged deeds, bribed officials, and most damning of all, a list of settlers who were removed from their land by force, several of whom have never been seen again. Pemberton was on his feet. Those ledgers were obtained illegally. They should be inadmissible. They were obtained by an employee of Mr. Harlan, Harrison countered. An employee who will testify that these records are authentic. The judge looked at Pemberton. Overruled. The evidence will stand. Clara felt a surge of hope. Harrison continued his questioning for another hour. Clara told the story from the beginning. The cellar, the rescue, the deal she'd made with Thomas, the attacks, the standoff. By the time she finished, half the courtroom was in tears. Now Pemberton stood. His smile made Clara's skin crawl. Miss Weston, Pemberton began. You claim my client kept you prisoner for 3 months. That's correct. And during those 3 months, did he ever physically harm you? Clara hesitated. He threatened me constantly. But did he ever actually strike you? Pemberton's eyes were cold. Beat you. Injure you in any way, not directly. So you were never actually harmed. I was locked in a flooded cellar. Clara's voice rose. I nearly drowned. But you didn't drown. Pemberton smiled. In fact, you seem remarkably healthy for someone who suffered such a terrible ordeal. Clara wanted to leap from the witness stand and strangle him. Mr. Pemberton. The judge's voice was sharp. Get to your point. My point. Your Honor is that Miss Weston has provided nothing but her word. No physical evidence of abuse. No witnesses to any violence. Just the accusations of a woman who, by her own admission, was sold by her brother to pay a debt. Clara's face burned with humiliation. I put it to the court, Pemberton continued, that Miss Weston is simply a scorned woman seeking revenge on a man who rejected her advances. That's a lie. Clara's voice cracked. Is it? Pemberton raised an eyebrow. You've admitted to sharing Mr. Brennan's bed, a man you'd known less than a week. Perhaps you have a history of such arrangements. Objection. Harrison was on his feet. The defense is attacking the witness's character without cause. Sustained. The judge glared at Pemberton. One more comment like that, and I'll hold you in contempt. Pemberton bowed slightly. No further questions. Clara stepped down from the witness stand. Her face was burning. Her hands were shaking. Thomas met her at the rail. He pulled her into his arms without a word. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "I should have been stronger. You were perfect." Thomas's voice was fierce. "That lawyer is scum. Everyone saw it. But what if it worked? What if the jury believes him? They won't." Thomas pulled back and looked into her eyes. "The truth is on our side. It has to be enough." The trial continued for 3 more days. Martha Hendricks testified. She broke down crying when she described finding her husband's pocket watch in the foundation of Harlan's rail station. Owen testified. He detailed every crime he'd witnessed while working as Harlan's bookkeeper. Every threat, every bribe, every disappearance. Thomas testified. He described the attacks on his ranch, the beating he'd received, the threats Harlan had made. Through it all, Harlan sat silent, that same smile on his face, like he knew something no one else did. On the final day, Pemberton called Harlan to the stand. Mr. Harlan Pemberton began. "Can you tell the court your version of events?" Harlan nodded slowly. "I'm a businessman. That's all I've ever been. I buy land. I build railroads. I create jobs. And what about the accusations against you lies?" Harlan spread his hands. "I never imprisoned anyone. I never threatened anyone. This is all a vendetta by people who are jealous of my success." "What about Clara Weston? A troubled young woman." Harlan's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Her brother owed me money. I offered to help her to give her a home. She misunderstood my intentions." Clara felt sick. "And Thomas Brennan, a bitter old man who convinced himself I was responsible for all his problems." Harlan shook his head sadly. "I feel sorry for him, honestly." Harrison stood for cross-examination. His eyes were cold. "Mr. Harlan, you claim you never harmed anyone, but we have testimony from 6 families who say you drove them off their land. Exaggerations, business disputes that got out of hand. We have ledgers documenting bribes to territorial officials. Forgeries. Anyone could have created those. We have a pocket watch belonging to John Hendricks found buried in your property, a man who has been missing for 6 years." Harlan hesitated. "Just for a second. I have no knowledge of how that watch got there." Harrison leaned closer. "Mr. Harlan, did you order your men to lock Clara Weston in a flooded cellar?" "No." "Did you lead an armed assault on Thomas Brennan's ranch?" "No." "Did you have John Hendricks murdered because he refused to sell you his land?" Harlan's mask slipped. His eyes flashed with rage. "You have no proof of anything." Harlan's voice rose. "You're grasping at straws. I am Victor Harlan. I built half this territory. You think a bunch of scared settlers and a scorned woman can bring me down?" The courtroom went silent. Harrison smiled. "No further questions, Your Honor." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Clara paced the hallway outside the courtroom. Thomas sat on a bench watching her. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor," he said. "I can't help it." Clara kept pacing. "What if they let him go? What if everything we went through was for nothing? Then we'll find another way. There is no other way." Clara stopped and faced him. "If Harlan walks free, he'll come for us. He'll kill us both." Thomas stood and walked to her. He took her hands. "Listen to me." His voice was calm. "Whatever happens in that courtroom, we've already won. How can you say that?" "Because we survived." Thomas squeezed her hands. "Because we found each other. Because I'm standing here with the woman I love and no jury verdict can take that away." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared." "I know." Thomas pulled her close. "Me too." The courtroom doors opened. A bailiff appeared. "The jury's back." Clara's heart stopped. They walked into the courtroom hand in hand. Owen fell in behind them. Harlan sat at the defendant's table, that same smile still on his face. The jury foreman stood, a weathered man with honest eyes. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of false imprisonment, how do you find guilty? Clara's knees buckled. Thomas caught her. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find guilty? A gasp rippled through the courtroom. On the charge of extortion, how do you find guilty? On the charge of bribery of public officials, how do you find guilty? On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of John Hendricks, how do you find? The foreman's voice rang out clear and strong. Guilty. Clara collapsed into Thomas's arms, sobbing. Harlan's smile finally disappeared. His face went white. No. His voice was a rasp. No, this isn't possible. I own this territory. I own everyone. The judge banged his gavel. Victor Harlan, you have been found guilty on all counts. I hereby sentence you to death by hanging, the sentence to be carried out at dawn tomorrow. Harlan lunged to his feet. This isn't over, he screamed. You hear me? This isn't over. Guards seized him and dragged him toward the door. As he passed Clara, he stopped fighting. His eyes locked onto hers. You think you've won. Harlan's voice was a hiss. But you'll never be free of me. You'll see my face every night in your dreams. Clara stepped forward. Her voice was steady. No, she said. I won't, because after tomorrow, you'll just be a memory. And I don't waste time on ghosts. Harlan's face twisted with rage. But before he could respond, the guards hauled him away. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Thomas pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her. In front of everyone. In front of the judge and the jury and the whole territory. Clara kissed him back. They'd won. They'd finally won. Harlan was hanged at dawn. Clara didn't watch. She didn't need to. Instead, she stood on the hotel balcony with Thomas watching the sun rise over the mountains. How do you feel? Thomas asked. Clara considered the question. Free. For the first time in 3 years, I feel completely free. Thomas wrapped his arm around her shoulders. What do you want to do now? Clara smiled. Go home. Back to the ranch. Back to our life. And then Clara turned to face him. And then I want you to marry me. Like we talked about. Thomas grinned. Right now? Why not Clara? Thomas laughed. We're in Helena. We don't have a preacher. We don't have witnesses. We have Owen. Clara's eyes sparkled. And I'm sure we can find a preacher somewhere in this town. Thomas looked at her. She was serious. You really want to get married today? I've waited long enough. Clara grabbed his hands. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to start our life together. Right now. Today. Thomas looked into her eyes. The same fierce green eyes that had looked up at him from a flooded cellar. The eyes of the woman who had saved him just as much as he'd saved her. Then, let's find a preacher, he said. They were married that afternoon. It was a simple ceremony. A small church on the edge of town. Owen stood as witness. Martha Hendricks came too, tears streaming down her face. Clara wore a white dress borrowed from the hotel owner's wife. Thomas wore his cavalry uniform for the first time in 20 years. Do you, Thomas James Brennan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The preacher asked. I do. And do you? Clara Ann Weston, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Thomas, at the lines on his face, the gray in his hair, the love in his eyes. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Thomas pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her. Owen cheered. Martha cried harder, and Clara Weston became Clara Brennan. They returned to the ranch 3 days later. Clara stood on the porch, looking out at the land that was now hers too. Thomas's land. Their land. Thomas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan. Clara smiled. I like the sound of that. They stood together in comfortable silence. Clara. Thomas's voice was soft. I need to tell you something. What, that promise you made? 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. Clara turned in his arms. What about it? I never needed it. Thomas touched her face. I didn't need you to cook for me, or clean for me, or do anything for me. All I needed was you. Then why did you agree? Because you needed it. Thomas's eyes were gentle. You needed to feel like you had control, like you had something to offer. I understood that. Clara felt tears prickling her eyes. You knew I knew from the moment you made the offer. Thomas smiled. You weren't bargaining with me. You were fighting for your dignity. How could I say no to that? Clara kissed him, soft and deep and full of love. New deal, she whispered against his lips. What kind of deal? 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. Not because I owe you, not because I'm scared, because I love you and I choose to spend every moment I can with you. Thomas grinned. I accept. Good. Clara kissed him again. Now take me inside. I believe it's afternoon. Thomas laughed and swept her up in his arms. Is this how it's going to be from now on? He asked. Every single day. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck. For the rest of our lives. Thomas carried her through the door. 5 years later, Clara stood on the same porch watching a different scene. A little girl with Thomas's eyes and Clara's dark hair chased chickens across the yard. Her laughter rang through the valley. Margaret, Clara called out. Don't chase them too far? Yes, Mama. Thomas appeared beside Clara, a cup of coffee in each hand. She's just like you, he said, fearless. Clara smiled. She gets it from her father. Thomas handed her a cup and slipped his arm around her waist. Happy, Clara looked at the ranch, at their daughter, at the man she'd built a life with. More than I ever thought possible. A horse appeared on the ridge above the ranch. Clara tensed instinctively before recognizing the rider. Uncle Owen. Margaret squealed and ran toward the approaching figure. Owen dismounted and scooped his niece into his arms. How's my favorite person in the whole world? Good. Margaret wrapped her arms around his neck. Did you bring me something? Maybe? Owen pulled a small wooden horse from his saddlebag. Found this in town. Thought you might like it. Margaret's eyes lit up. She grabbed the toy and ran off to show her imaginary friends. Owen walked up to the porch. His face was weathered now, lined with years of hard work and harder choices, but his eyes were clear, sober. How's the ranch in Wyoming? Thomas asked. Good. Growing. Owen smiled. Never thought I'd be a cattleman, but it suits me. Clara reached out and squeezed her brother's hand. I'm proud of you. Owen's eyes glistened. That means everything. He cleared his throat. Actually, I came to give you some news. What kind of news? I'm getting married. Owen's smile widened. Her name's Sarah. She's a schoolteacher in Cheyenne. I want you both to come to the wedding. Clara felt joy spreading through her chest. Owen, that's wonderful. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Owen looked at Clara. Besides my sister forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. Clara pulled him into a hug. Everyone deserves a second chance. You taught me that. No. Owen pulled back and looked at her. You taught me that. You and Thomas. You showed me that it's never too late to become the person you're supposed to be. Thomas stepped forward and extended his hand. Congratulations. We'll be at that wedding. Owen shook it firmly. Thank you. For everything. They spent the afternoon together. Owen played with Margaret while Clara and Thomas watched from the porch. As the sun began to set, Owen mounted his horse. Same time next month, he asked. Same time. Clara waved. Clara, give our love to Sarah. Owen rode off toward the ridge. At the top he turned and waved one last time. Then he was gone. Thomas pulled Clara close. Good day. The best. Margaret ran up to them, exhausted from playing. Mama, can I hear the story again? Clara smiled. Which story? The one about how you and Papa met. Thomas laughed. That's a long story. Please. Margaret looked up with those big, innocent eyes. I love that story. Clara knelt down and touched her daughter's face. Once upon a time, she began, there was a woman trapped in a cellar full of water. She was scared and alone, and she thought she was going to die. But she didn't die. Margaret's voice was breathless with anticipation. No, she didn't die. Clara smiled, because a man heard her scream. A man who had been hiding from the world for years. He broke down the door and saved her. And then what happened? Then she made him a promise. Clara looked up at Thomas. 3 times a day. Morning, noon, and night. What did she promise? She promised to remind him what it felt like to be alive. Clara stood and took Thomas's hand, and she kept that promise. Every single day, for the rest of their lives. Margaret sighed happily. That's my favorite story. It's my favorite too. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. Now let's go inside. Time for dinner. Margaret ran toward the house. Clara and Thomas followed hand in hand. At the door, Thomas stopped. Clara. Yes, thank you. For what? For screaming loud enough for me to hear. Thomas pulled her close. For choosing me, when you could have chosen anyone. For giving me a second chance at life. Clara touched his face. You gave me the same thing. They kissed as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Inside, their daughter waited. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. And in Clara's heart, the promise she'd made in a flooded cellar had transformed into something far greater. Not a bargain. Not a transaction. Just love. 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, forever.